Hey everyone, and welcome back to Amaranth Bay. Today we're going to be finishing off our version of Duluth's Canal Park by building a series of hotels along the shoreline. To nobody's surprise, we're going to be taking inspiration from the same place in Duluth. Now, in real life, there are 4 fairly large hotels taking up this space, but we kind of have one section over here taken up by our streetcar depot, so I pretty quickly decided on just having 3 hotels here instead of 4, and that's going to give us a lot more room to work with and to detail them up without having them all crammed together. I didn't want to obstruct the view from this park that we built last episode, so I decided to have this area be open here. That's going to be an additional part of the Lake Walk Park, and that way we can have a nice balance between development and accessibility and green space along the lake. So for this first hotel, I'm just going to quickly put together a parking lot. I tried to vary it up a little bit so it's not just like the usual rectangular lot. I tried to make pretty efficient use of the land, as far as a parking lot can actually be efficient land use, but I think you know what I mean. And then I'm going to go in and fill up some of these large areas of pavement with planters, and otherwise not putting down too many details, just a few trees and some fences as well. I feel like parking lots like this usually aren't overflowing with interesting details, but I did want to make it feel like it fit into the area as a whole. Around the back of these hotels, things are going to get a little bit more interesting. I wanted to make it look like the main attraction of staying in these hotels would be direct access to this Lake Walk Park, which eventually, at least the plan is to have it run pretty much all the way along the lake. There's going to be a path that's, pretty busy and paved, and then eventually it kind of tapers off into a trail that goes through kind of the natural shoreline. But anyway, they're going to have entrances. They're going to have little patios out here, which would probably be attached to restaurants. So in the like 2 months of summer that they have, you could sit out there and eat or whatever. So I'm going to try to give each one of these hotels a unique little patio with a unique variety of landscaping around it. One thing that I'm going to try to use to tie them together is these jetty rocks. I noticed that a lot of the hotels in the real life reference have these kind of large rocks laid out along the pathway. And I don't know if that was leftover from the creation of this shoreline, because I believe the shoreline along this section of Canal Park is an artificial shoreline. So maybe they had some rocks left over from that and they just used them as decoration, or maybe there was some other source. I don't really know, and it doesn't really matter. I'm just using them because they look cool. Finally, I'm going to put a residential block within the hotel to represent that there's a more or less constant number of guests staying here, and they're just going to serve us as unwilling citizens of Amaranth. Moving on to the next one, this is just going to be a pretty generic Best Western, so I wanted to go with a much simpler parking lot design. I'm just using the original parking lot roads, which don't mesh super well with the other road assets that I'm using, but I'm going to try to blend them together with some decals, and I'm going to do the same thing as we did with the first parking lot with some planters and trees. Just like with the parking lot on this one, I wanted to keep the area out back on the simpler side. So I'm just going to clean up the area back here with a few pieces of ploppable grass and fill in these empty areas with some pavement brushes to make it look like all of these are directly connected to the Lake Walk pavement. Then I'm going to detail up this main patio area with a couple of planters and some benches, like I said, keeping it nice and simple. I'm also going to add a vending machine out back, which I don't really know if an outdoor vending machine would fit into this kind of climate, but it's going there, and it just seems like the kind of thing you would find at a Best Western for some reason. For this third hotel, I wanted to go back to a somewhat more complicated parking lot with a turnaround little roundabout thing right at the entrance, which for some reason I couldn't really get these nodes to connect at first, but eventually I was able to get it to work with Network Multi-Tool. Of course, that presents some problems with building the parking lot. It doesn't really fit into the rectangular paradigm, so I kind of just have to take these parking lot road networks and wing it and plop these down until I get something that works. I try to create a little angled shape over here just to make it look a little fancier and more interesting. And we're going to use that triangle of grass down there as part of the Lakewalk Park. As far as details go, this entrance ended up being a little bit more interesting than the other hotels. We have this brick surface in the turnaround, which I think looks kind of cool. I'm going to take these rocks and embed them down into the ground a little bit, and then attach some arrows to the rocks here, indicating that it is a one-way roundabout. I kind of like that little detail. I think it's kind of cute. And then we're going to adjust the context of this as necessary to fit a couple of crosswalks all the way across the parking lot here. I'm just thinking this place is going to be, this will probably be the most expensive and nicest hotel of the three. So they're going to shell out a little bit more for some pedestrian infrastructure. Another part of their pedestrian infrastructure is this little pathway that winds its way around back and connects up with some of these structures around the back side of the hotel. It has some really interesting little shaded areas and patios built in, so I'm going to try to work around that with some different styles of paths, some foliage, and various other details to make it look nice and integrated into this Lakewalk Park. One thing I love about this set of pedestrian paths that I'm using is that it comes with a matching set of decals. So you get this nice simple tile texture, but it's not very flexible when you just have the network version. So I'm going to use this decal version that it comes with and extend this same texture all the way along the kind of built-in pavement of the building, and that just makes it look a lot more unified. There's so many assets that come with really nice ground textures built in, but then you can't really extend it or copy it or anything like that because you just don't have the proper asset to do that with, other than maybe copying it with PO and isolating the ground asset, which I've done before, but that's just kind of a pain, and it's not really worth the effort in most cases. So I really appreciate that the mod author did that, and I'll link the asset down in the description in case you're interested. So after finishing up this little landscaped area that gives a little privacy to this hotel, we're going to move on and finish off the Lakewalk Park. Like I mentioned before, we're going to take this little triangle of grass and connect it up to the Lakewalk pathway via this small pathway here. And I'm going to try to vary it up a little bit and not just go for the straightest path in between the 2 points. I wanted to kind of wind it around here, and we're going to add in some trees and stuff later on that's going to make it look a little bit more inviting. I'm also quickly going to clean up the road here, add some of these details, copy and paste them from the intersection that we made last time with these stop signs and these little yield signs for the bike lanes to give pedestrians precedence at the intersection. And then over here, instead of just having the park go all the way up to the tracks, I wanted to have, maybe this is an old building, or at least the site of an old historic building, and instead of being demolished and turned into additional parkland, it was sold and is now run as a small brew pub, which I thought was kind of an interesting idea. And it's just going to diversify up our waterfront a little bit, because right now this side of the lake is basically just the streetcar depot and the hotels, which isn't going to quite bring enough people to the general vicinity of the park. So this is going to draw an additional kind of crowd. You know, anyone who's going to come here and have some beer at the brew pub is probably going to want to take a walk along the lake as well. So it's just going to make this place more popular and interesting, I think. The detailing's pretty straightforward. Just going to squeeze down the building a little bit to fit into this relatively small plot of land and separate off the parking lot from the rest of the park, because I assume they're going to want to prevent people from parking in this private parking lot to access the public park without first depositing some money into their coffers. Now to spruce up the park area with a few small details, mostly just to break it up and keep it from looking like the same networks and trees over and over again. I'm going to have these little park bench areas. Sometimes you see them, they'll be slightly off a path on the grass, but then they'll have a concrete base underneath, so I'm just using some concrete step assets for that. And then we're going to have some larger, older trees. Maybe there was an original area of forest that has been preserved here for whatever reason, even though it would have been a big industrial area originally. You know, maybe they had the foresight, oh, we'll keep this little area of forest here. So some of those large, old trees have been maintained here. I'm not sure about the color tones. They seem quite a bit different, which, I mean, isn't that unusual for trees, but it does feel like a bit much. Let me know what you think of that. It's kind of just hard to find a consistent set of tree assets. But anyway, to finish off the episode, I wanted to replace some of the signage on the hotels and the brew pub just to make it feel a little bit more custom. Now, this is probably one of the shortest episodes I've ever made. I apologize for that. This first run of 5 episodes building Canal Park definitely are shorter than what I'm used to making. But I've kind of eased myself into the series now, into making these videos. So I think we're going to start getting into some bigger projects from now on. And speaking of that, we are done with at least this main central part of our version of Canal Park. There are a few details here and there that we'll probably still need to do. But next time we're going to be jumping across the freeway that we started a couple episodes ago and working on things that are going to be a lot of fun. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm not going to say any more than that, other than thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.